Okay, Edwin had this.
Given that the Buddha has, I would say, insight into the future, of course, right? I mean, wouldn't he have known that he was going to die? Of course, he knows. And maybe when the monks came to him, I never see that happen yet, where he would say, "Well, I knew that he was. That was the purpose of the teachings."
Yeah.
I don't know. I see that connecting to why the Buddha would not have known.
Yeah, first, I'm not sure that the...
He has the same powers, I meant to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the texts say that the Buddha knows everything that's going to happen in the future. Though in this case, I would think he would have been able to know that there was this, karma created by Pukkusāti, which reached a point of maturity such that he was destined to die very soon. But maybe he saw that this, this is like I don't know the answer to this. Maybe, you would say, maybe he saw that the karma was so strongly determined that there was no way to avoid it.
Also, Nazi, actually, I mean, he's going to be, it's in the pure goals, right? That we don't
Yeah.
pure goals, but the Buddha speaks about nothingness and goes beyond that. So, what was the purpose of teaching something where he's not going to accomplish yet? Not that he shouldn't. I mean, it's not like he shouldn't have known.
I'm not quite sure that I understand.
Pukkusāti was actually reborn in the
Yeah, pure abode, yeah. Yeah.
he goes into explaining to Pukkusāti about the nothingness and
Oh, I see. Okay.
why couldn't he have fallen further? I mean, he had.
Well, I think the point here is that the Buddha is describing the progress of a meditator who reaches this equanimity that's said to be purified, bright and pure and bright. And so I would understand that this would be the equanimity in the fourth jhana. And so here the Buddha is showing the possibility is that one who has reached the fourth jhana can then consider going beyond the fourth jhana in the scale of samadhi by reaching the formless meditative attainments. But he doesn't, this meditator described by the Buddha doesn't go on to reach those attainments because or at least he doesn't dwell in them, because he sees that if he were to dwell in them without developing wisdom, then his consciousness will just re-arise in that corresponding realm, remain there for a long time, and then pass away. And so he'll still be stuck within the cycle of birth and death.
So the fourth jhana would be actually the fifth in the Dhamma.
Yeah, we don't. Let's not bring in the Yeah. Okay, just keep to the sutta scheme. Yeah.
So he was already practically equanimity. He already experienced equanimity.
Yeah.
So he's actually experiencing the material.
He hasn't gone to the. One doesn't get the impression that he's gone to the immaterial attainments. The Buddha explains it. Yeah, so it seems that Pukkusāti, based on the fourth jhana, reached the stage of non-returner. And so on that basis, then he was reborn in the pure abodes. Yeah. Yeah. Paritrishyate. Pali was what? Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Um, the older language of India used for their scriptures preceding the time of Buddhism was Vedic Sanskrit. There are different strata within the Vedas. There's the Samhita, which is the oldest portion. Then come the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. Four layers in the Vedas. I mean, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar or a Vedic scholar, so I don't know what the language is like. But I think even the Upanishads, which is the latest portion, still uses the forms of Vedic Sanskrit. Okay, then let's say the Buddha might be a century, 150 years after the fundamental Upanishads. And the language actually he spoke was not Pali, but it would have been the languages of northeast India, probably Magadhi and maybe Kosalan, and other dialects, which were, these languages are grouped together under the designation Middle Indo-Aryan languages, because it's from the middle period. And then Pali is considered to be, they call it a artificial language, which brings together the features of the Eastern spoken languages that the Buddha would have used with features from Western India. So my suspicion is actually that Pali is close to the language that would have been used around the place where Sanchi is located, close to present-day Bhopal, because that is where Mahinda, the son of King Ashoka, and Sangamita, the daughter of King Ashoka, that is where they were based before they went to Sri Lanka. Okay, and so this is the spoken languages like Pali simplify forms that are more complex, even in Vedic Sanskrit. And then after the time of the Buddha, I think this would be even after the time of King Ashoka, who was about 150 years after the Buddha, then Brahmanism flourished. And with the flourishing of Brahmanism, Sanskrit came to be codified, formalized and codified by the Sanskrit grammarians. And then we enter the age of what is called classical Sanskrit, which differs in some respects from Vedic Sanskrit. Then once Sanskrit came to flourish, then Buddhist texts underwent a process of partial Sanskritization. And so that gave rise to a language that's called Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. Even the Pali Canon has some Sanskrit features, but not as much as texts from other traditions. There was an article by K.R. Norman, I don't remember, I'll have to search for it, which gave a good chronology of the languages. So that was the first question, then you said the second question. Sanskritized, yeah. For example, some forms that we see in Pali that probably were not original to the older Pali texts. We have two forms indicating there, the word there. One is tatta with T-T-H-A. That seems to be the form more natural to Pali. But we also find tatra, T-R-A. So that group, a consonant followed by R, is characteristic of Sanskrit, but not of the Middle Indo-Aryan dialects. And even the word Brahmana for a Brahmin seems to be a feature of, or to indicate a Sanskritization of the text. Because there are some puns in the suttas which don't make sense if one uses the word Brahmana, but they make sense if one uses the word that's been conjectured to have been the form used in the Buddha's time, was Bhamana. And so the the puns make sense if we have Bhamana, but if when we change that to Brahmana, then the pun becomes unworkable. No, there would have been the Sanskrit words would have been there from in the Vedic Sanskrit. Story about, yeah. 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 Yeah, I think I said last week when we started the sutta, I said I was giving the background story to this sutta, if you remember, and then I said this story is coming from the commentary, and sometimes one has to, question the commentaries and the information in the commentaries. And not only the commentaries, even sometimes in the sutta, it will say, for example, well, the thought occurred to so-and-so. And so when I read this, I wonder, how do the compilers of the suttas know that that thought occurred to so-and-so? Anyway, coming back to your question, yeah, the stories, the background stories, where they originate, I don't know. Often they involve some fantastic elements which strain my credulity. So I say this is what the commentary says, but be careful that don't always think that the commentary is 100% reliable, particularly for background stories, because one could see that as preachers who are giving sermons and discourses on the suttas will feel that, well, to make it interesting, I have to give some background to the sutta. And so they will come up with a very simple story, and then their students will think, the story is too simple, we have to make it more interesting. It gets more elaborate, and their students think, that's still too simple, and then it becomes still more elaborate. And so the story starts snowballing, picking up more and more material till you have a full elaborate account. But maybe in some of the background stories that there are historical elements, this we have to use our judgment to determine. But I say that the commentaries are very valuable in giving explanations of words. Sometimes they play with words. They engage in word plays to bring out, I call this ethical derivations rather than literal, ethical etymologies rather than literal etymologies. So they'll try to explain a word in order to bring out moral meanings, or sometimes using word plays that are not really acceptable. Like, for example, there's the word kusala, which means we take to mean good or wholesome. Okay, so I think one way that they explain that is the prefix ku sometimes means bad. And then there's a verb salati, which means to cut. So kusala is explained as that which cuts the bad. But I don't think that's the original derivation at all. It was just a word of ordinary usage. And then also when the commentaries are giving doctrinal explanations, often what they are doing is interpreting statements or terms in the suttas through the lens of the developed Theravada tradition, especially drawing ideas from the Abhidhamma and drawing upon ideas that come from the elder teachers, the ancient teachers. And so sometimes one has to view these explanations against what the texts themselves say, by looking at other relevant texts and then trying to determine what from this is reliable and what is speculation, or applying a kind of fixed system to terms which didn't have such fixed, definite meanings in the original discourses. Yeah. The idea that it said that Pali is the Mula Bhasa. What lies behind that expression? Mula Bhasa means the root language, the basic language. This is a commentarial idea that that Pali is sort of the intrinsic language which is sort of imprinted upon the brains, into the brains or the minds of all human beings. So that if you take a child before it's had engaged in conversation with other human beings, when it's an infant, and you bring it up in the wild, so that it's maybe brought up by wolves, and then you bring it back when it reaches maturity into human society, then it won't have been exposed to the corrupting influence of other human languages. So when it starts to speak, to communicate, it will naturally be speaking Pali. So if you want to learn Pali well, you don't have to study the language. Just try to forget all of your other all the corrupting influences of your English and Chinese and French and Spanish, whatever other languages you've learned. Richard, yeah. Yeah.
And also, what I'd say is deceit is important. Because I think that the same kind of usages exist now in English. For instance, there was last night at the Unitarian Church in Westport, there was an occasion in which people showed up to tell each other the worst lies they'd ever told.
Mm.
Okay? And what struck me was that what they thought they were talking about was actually deceit, not lying, because it is possible to deceive someone
Yeah.
without actually telling any lie.
Yeah.
Even do it while saying nothing.
Yeah.
And right, because you can allow them to
Yeah.
persist in a false belief,
Yeah.
which you know is false, and which friends would assume you would say something about if you knew it and you knew the importance that it had to them. Right? So
Yeah.
that it's a hostile act not to correct them. Right? And so deceit is what's really significant as the action of deceiving someone else
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah.
It's much more important than the act of lying, because lying isn't necessary to it. You can also, for instance, deceive one person by telling the truth to another person, when the relationship would signify that if you're willing to tell the truth to the person, say that you know less well,
Yeah.
then you were certainly obligated to tell it to the person you knew better. And so you can deceive the person you don't speak to,
Yeah.
right? But while saying only a true statement to
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah.
But I found that, at this meeting last night, people weren't making that distinction.
Yeah.
They were thinking, well, the religious issue somehow is lying or not lying.
Yeah. Yeah.
The actual injury is incurred
Yeah.
by deception,
Yeah.
by deceiving.
Yeah.
And so I think that what people sense is that, what matters is your knowledge of your own intentions and your own beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not whether or not you're literally telling the truth or lying.
Yeah. Can you give an example of
Yeah.
deceiving somebody by telling the truth?
Yes, it's a horrible one from my own life when I was in 8th grade. I was in a math class, an Algebra 1 class, with my next door neighbor, who was, who at the end of the class stood up and said, "In flas caput," to the math teacher, which in Latin means "you blow the head." Okay, as he was accusing him of being gay at the time. This was 1962.
Yeah.
Okay, and the teacher didn't know what that Latin phrase meant, but Danny and I were both in the same Latin class, so I knew.
Yeah.
And so the teacher said, "Who said that? What does that mean?" Right? Nobody said anything. But then at the end of the day, I went back to the Latin teacher whom I thought I was obligated to because he was an authority, and I said, "It means you blow the head." And so eventually the principal was called for Danny's parents to go in and talk to the vice principal. And for this, I knew a lot was riding for Danny, because he was very
Yeah.
Okay, now he was, I think, too young. It was 8th grade, so I'm not aware of any lasting effect it had. But I knew what I'd done, and he didn't know what I'd done. I'd made a true statement to the math teacher, whereas my real and deeper obligation was as a friend to him. And so I deceived him about what my relationship was with him and the teacher by making a true statement to the teacher.
Yeah.
It's deceit.
Yeah.
It's not a lie.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, that raises up, a lot of issues, but I want to sort of keep it directly relevant to the sutta.
Well, what I'm trying to,
Yeah.
make my point about this, and that is that this is then translated, which, false people, which has a deceptive nature.
Yeah.
I think, you see, the psychology of, truth and lying and all of that they're using is a kind of introverted psychology. It's a knowledge of intentions, spiritual states.
Yeah.
And so they are projecting that knowledge of this, of what they don't want to call the self, onto internal knowledge. That is, since objective statements are more valued in the West, the translation comes out deceptive nature, but I think they're actually thinking about the intention of deceit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Does somebody else have comment or question? Okay, then we'll end for the day, and we have a class next week. Don't forget, we already did Sutta number 141. That was before I went away in October. And so next time we will be taking Sutta number 142. And I have to lay my cards on the table now. Maybe this is a sutta that I have some suspicion of the authenticity about. What?
I thought I made a lot of good investment.
Well, you have to find out where my qualms about the sutta are by coming next week. It's called the Dhātuvibhanga Sutta, which is the Exposition of Offerings. And next week we'll go back to the Guanyin Hall. Unless you prefer here, which do you prefer?
Acoustics-wise, here is better.
This is better.
Especially for the internet.
Okay, then we can come here.
But when it's too cold, so I just want to report acoustic-wise it's better here.
But distance-wise,
When,
you mean going up to the...
when it's too cold. No? Okay.
What is that?
Okay. Great.
What do you prefer then? To myself, it's the same. What do you prefer? Yeah. Okay, then we could come here. Okay, so let us end with 3 half bows to Buddha.